Yeah, but we have questions for you, and we hope we can answer them for our community.
Certainly try.
Yeah. Maybe I should introduce yourself.
Yeah. I'm Matt Werfel. I'm one of the game design leads at Richten.
And I'm Liz Kirchstein. I'm a marketing spokesperson.
Okay. So, we have a few questions regarding lore. Yeah. People want to know, we know that stealth remote force turns to stone. And they want to know, is it possible that we see this being reverted and maybe make force playable way?
I mean, we'll say that nothing is off the table.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't have anything. Yeah. We don't have anything to announce at this time about new playable races, certainly. But we know that people are really interested in what happened to the dwarves, and so it is something that we get a lot of questions about. Definitely something that we keep kind of in mind as we're building out stories and kind of figuring out where the franchise is going to go over time. That's something that we have members of the team who care a lot about what happens with that lore. And so definitely something that we're aware of, and we're looking at, hey, how do we integrate this into the story, or where can we dovetail that back and kind of close that loop? But right now we don't have anything.
Are the dwarfs only located in sugar boots, or are there some lore about dwarfs on other continents?
Well, we can really only talk about the dwarves that you see in game right now, because to talk about what's on other continents might be a spoiler or imply something that we don't intend to announce right now.
Will we get to see the old races of Tyria, like Musa or the Forgotten, maybe in some kind of living story? Or
so I think that falls into that same category as the dwarves, that we know there's a lot of people who are really interested in the lore of Guild-Wars 1. We have a lot of lore to draw on, a lot of interesting storylines. Mursad is something that comes up all the time as something that people want to see and they're interested in. How do we tie this back? And there's a lot of conspiracy theories that go on, and discussions of that type. But it falls again into the category of those are things that we're really excited that people are talking about. When we talk about how we do the story for Living World and other things, we're very aware of what areas of the map we're going into and what the ties back to GW1 are. And so it's something that's in conversations, but we don't have any specifics about how we're going to get back to that.
Okay, something more recent. What about the other things? Will we get to know more about them later, or are they off the table because they were living story one?
So I think you can see kind of what we're doing with Living Story. We introduce, in Season 2, we've introduced a new map, and we've moved towards a more permanent content model where we have the Living Story journal, and you can go back and play through those episodes again at any point in time. And so those maps exist as a slice of time. That content's always going to be available. And so just because something came up in Season 1 doesn't mean that we can't now bring it in a future season and advance that storyline overall. And so if we did do anything with the Aether Blades or the Watchwork Army or any of the things that kind of came out of Season 1, you would probably see them in a Living World season where we want to advance that storyline and say, all right, you know what happened in Season 1, now this is how they're impacting the world going forward. So we'll continue to see some of the armies that we introduced in Season 1. We definitely don't want to just introduce them for a single season and then not use them anymore. Both from an assets side and from a lore and story side, it doesn't make sense to kind of introduce little things here and there that are very specific to one piece of content. But it really comes down to when it's right for the story to delve more into that. And sometimes we'll do little things off to the side that kind of explore in-depth portions of that. But most of the time it has to kind of be core to where that whole story arc is going. So all I can really say is stay tuned, and that stuff isn't off the table. You can certainly come back in future seasons.
Sounds good. We have some questions regarding events and the future, and people want to know, but some people were disappointed with last year's Halloween and Winter's Day because unlike Guild Wars 1 where new content was added on top of the old stuff, in Guild Wars 2 we had completely new events, skipping all the old stuff, or most of the old stuff, and people were wondering, will we be able to play all the stuff from the first Halloween and the first Winter's Day someday, or are there plans to only do new events?
It's a good question. To be honest, some of that comes down to the technical side of how we implemented things at first, but it's definitely something where we want to engage players and say, hey, if you really like this aspect of Halloween, like you can always count on Halloween coming back, and so figuring out what portions of the content we can actually technically reuse without a great deal of work, and then what portions of content we want to add and layer new storylines on top of. There's some conflict there, there's definitely some friction there, but it's something that we're looking into. I can't really give any specifics on this coming Halloween or Winter's Day, but it is something that we're committed to doing going forward. We want to build, as part of the living world, you have stories that's happening, and it's more like a television season where you have, season 2 has episodes, and then you also have specific holidays that we bring back over time. Sometimes that means that we have to rework specific content to actually make it work better than it did the first time, which always takes some amount of time. And so I don't know that I can say much more than that, but it's as much as possible we want to let people play the game and play the portions of the game that they're excited about.
Yeah, Dragon Bash was a lot of fun, and we expected it to see it back this year. We didn't by now. Will we see it back anytime soon? Or?
So Dragon Bash in the year came up at an would have come up at an interesting kind of point in the storyline that we were in around the time that a year mark would have been, and we certainly want to be conscientious of not just interjecting a holiday that isn't necessarily traditional yet. So it's another one that might see a return in the future, but the citizens of Tyria were in a bad place at that moment, so maybe not so much with Dragon Bash.
Okay, so another question that's asked a lot: Super Adventure Box. Will we see it back soon, or will we have to be patient?
It's another one of those that we certainly don't have anything to say right now. We know how well loved it is, and many of us enjoy it very much ourselves. So it may be back in the future, but we certainly can't talk about it.
Okay.
I understand you have to ask.
Yeah, I do. Our community is all about Super Adventure Box, and they speculated it to be back in September or something because it will be a year after the last one. So yeah, people are really looking forward to Super Adventure Box. Myself too. Guild Wars 1 had elite missions like the Deep, where you up to the player limit for a group. Will we see such content in Guild Wars 2 for more than 5 people? Because some people feel it's not enough if you have bigger guilds. You want to play with more people.
Yeah, so there's some content that exists that kind of fits into that space. I think guild missions right now, there's some guild adventures that kind of fit into that space. Those are in the open world, and so it's always a little bit like you can open up a guild race and then everyone can jump into that thing. And so there's definitely that space that you're talking about. Like, hey, how do we do something for 10 to 20 players that's very directed? So it's something that we think about a lot, and we talk about trying to figure out how we can approach problems like that, but nothing specific at this time.
What about the mini games that were teased, especially before launch? Some achievements went into the game after launch, like Bar Brawl, and we have that portal for Polymorph. Are there still plans on doing those, or?
So, like a lot of things in this list, I can't give you specifics about a lot of that stuff. We definitely have people that are really excited about Polymorph. It's something that comes up in a lot of our internal discussions about if we were going to do this, how would we do it, and what would it take, what form would it take in GW2. as you've noticed, there are a lot of things that existed in GW1 and then they may not exist in GW2, or they exist in GW2 in a different form. And some of that comes down to GW2 being a broader game in terms of the number of different types of players that we're trying to appeal to. But also it comes down to if we're going to do something from GW1 and bring it into GW2, we want to make sure that we approach it in a way that we have enough time to build the version of it that we really want to build. And then also enough time to get feedback from alphas and internal testing to say, yeah, we're really excited about this and we know that it's going to be good for our game, good for GW2 fans. And so anything like that takes a lot of time. It's always something that's kind of on the periphery of discussions around the office. People are thinking about, hey, how can we incorporate this into the game? That's where a lot of the activities came from in Season 1, and you have things like Sanctum Sprint and some of the other short-term activities that Belcher's Bluff. Those things come out of some of those same discussions about, hey, we want to incorporate this particular style of gameplay into the game. How can we do it in a way that's exciting and fun? And those ones took a long time to put in the game, and then when you add on top of that the expectations of something that existed in GW1, it means that we want to be extra careful about getting it in and making sure that it's right before we release it.
So you can say you're working on it, maybe with just a few people, but it's not off the table completely.
I can say that it's something that we talk about a lot. There's not anything specific that we can announce about what we're working on at this point in time, but you know, we talk about what we're doing with mini pets and if we're going to do
far future.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the ego perspective view that was seen in the Edge of the Mist beta client? We have a lot of people doing videos and stuff who really want this feature. Will we see this feature in live anytime soon? Or
I'm not familiar with it, so I don't know if you...
because it's a beta client, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is something that is going to go live. It's another something that we can't talk about our plans for. It's something that is certainly not off the table that we would have shown it to people if there was no chance it would ever go live. But that doesn't mean it's certainly anymore. So we know it's something people are excited about, and we always listen to that feedback and keep it in mind when we're making plans for the future.
A while ago you asked the player what they want from a template system. Does that mean you're actively working on a template system?
I would say that if you look at the things that we do with some of our initiatives on the forums and some of our press events with fans and even direct interactions in game, we're always trying to get information from players in terms of what do they want, and if we were going to build a system, what kinds of things would you be looking for out of it. That said, that never means that we're building that system at that very moment. It just means, hey, this is something that we know you care about, and it's going to go on a big list of things that we want to work on at some point in time, and we want to get information from fans about what do you expect when if we were going to build this kind of system, what are you expecting? That helps us get an idea of, to some degree, the time frame of something and also the priority in terms of what the fans want, which is not always the same as what we want, but you have to weigh those two things against each other when you're determining which features are going to build. That's typically something that Colin and the directors get involved in terms of, hey, which features are we going to build now and which ones are we going to build after. But I think templates, and there are a couple other examples that we probably throw out, of things that we want to get information about and we want to get feedback on. Doesn't mean that we're building them right now. Doesn't mean that there's any kind of date on when those things will come out. Just means, hey, we care about what you think.
Okay. What about precursor craft?
That's another one that we know that if and when we do it, we want to do it very, very right. And it's one that we don't have anything else about right now, but it's something that we've definitely been listening to their feedback and definitely thinking about. And yeah, so it's something that we can't talk about right now, but it's something that we know is important and we want to make right.
I can tell you that we have a weekly economy meeting where a bunch of people from different disciplines come in and talk about the economy. precursors are involved as part of our economy, and so that often makes it into that meeting discussion of, hey, we're not happy with where precursors are right now, we're not happy with what you have to do as a player to acquire them, we don't think it's fun, and we get that feedback from players often. So it's definitely something that we're exploring and figuring out how are we going to try and approach this difficult problem.
Okay. Yeah, there's only 2 questions left. One of those is about skill. Unlike most other minions, the Necromancer's flesh body is kind of hydrophobic. Why is this the case?
So I don't know the specifics of the Necromancer. I'm exposing my bias. I, as a warrior.
I don't know the specifics of balance. I'm not part of that team, so I don't know why they chose, to not make that elite skill part of that. But I know that we are very conscientious about, making a distinction between those types of skills and figuring out why something goes there. So I'm not the person to talk about it either.
It's definitely something that we could take that and we could get it to the skills and balance team and get you an action.
Yeah, people ask for something like a bonefish as a replacement. Like the elementalist has the whirlpool instead of the tornado. So
You totally pass that question on.
okay. One last question. Fragen or Sprit? What's your favorite? That wasn't part of the question. If you had to choose,
what am I choosing them for?
just what's your favorite? What do you like most?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think there are so many things about script that are really funny to me. But every time that I see any word that has way too many O's in it, and you see Quaggin swimming around, they just kind of look so silly. I'm gonna go with Quaggin, even though I might regret it later.
Shiny?
Char.
Shiny?
So that's for our questions. Thanks for your